the entrepreneurs that are creative problem solvers, right? That when they need to pivot, when they're staring at bankruptcy, when, a partnership goes bad or joint venture, like when the chips are down, when, it looks like you should pack up and fold your tent. That's when you really, really need, to be part of other entrepreneurs groups, to really have a network of people that you can say, hey, look, here's my problem. Here's why I can't sleep at night. Here's what I'm trying to figure out.
Welcome to the Break Free podcast, where we interview bright minds, successful entrepreneurs that are changing the world with their work so that the rest of us can learn and also prosper. We have today with us a very good friend of mine, Jaret. Brother, welcome to the show.
Awesome. It's always a pleasure to be on the show, and even a greater pleasure to be chatting with you, David.
Wonderful. So you have a beautiful backdrop. Tell me, where is that? Do you know where that is?
Yeah, this is Swiss Alps. So been very fortunate in my entrepreneurial endeavors. So now I can take a sabbatical from time to time. And my wife and I did Swiss Italy, and then a bunch of my friends flew over. We rented BMW motorcycles and we toured. It was a lifetime tour, like once in a lifetime. We motorcycled the 7 highest mountain passes in the Alps. It was awesome.
Oh, wow. So that's why I call this podcast the Break Free podcast, right? It's turning out to be one of the best business podcasts, and it's about breaking free from the day-to-day, from the normal life, and having a better future than your present. And how do you achieve freedom while you're actually changing the world with your work, with your enterprise? People think it's easy. It's not easy, as you know. It's very, very hard. But at the same time, it's so rewarding once you make it, if you have the persistence and the perseverance to learn and to actually implement what you're learning. So for the audience, tell me, can you give me your full name? Where do you live and what do you do for a living?
My name's Jaret Henhoeffer. I live in West Mount Rose, Ontario, which is just outside Kitchener-Waterloo on the beautiful Grand River. So I can kayak without having to leave my house. And what do I do for a living? I am a investor and entrepreneur. I do own a active solar company, and I invest in and mentor and also do M&A, help people buy and sell companies today. And that's all a result of a timely, lucky decision to become an entrepreneur myself.
Beautiful. I know this is going to be an awesome podcast because you just mentioned a whole bunch of things that most people in the world will never be able to accomplish. And you mentioned like 4 or 5 things. So let's go back to the past, brother. You were born and raised in Western Ontario?
Yeah, I was born and raised in first world farm poverty, as I like to call it. Beautiful little 50-acre pig farm. Parents worked off the farm, two jobs each in order to finance and save the farm when interest rates went to 21% in the 1980s. I had a wonderful childhood. We grew all the food we need. We bartered for the rest. I played lots of, small town hockey, good Canadian boy, and grew up in nature and just loving nature. But it established in me a fear of poverty and a burning desire to figure out how money is made and how it works in our society, so that I would never have that uncomfortable feeling, and I could, provide a life for my own family.
Tell me from your point of view, what was poverty like? Like when you're talking about scarcity, how was that manifested in your childhood?
So, we had food, but the cupboards were bare. We grew pigs, we grew chickens, we got milk from the neighbor. So we had, healthy food, but we never bought anything from the grocery store, so a lot of it was the little things. The other people in school, they bring their school lunch and they'd have, treats and snacks and, this, that, and the other thing. And I didn't. And, it in hindsight, it was great, But at the time, I remember another example of things that stuck with me. I was fortunate enough to play on this hockey team that was the most winningest team in our little town, in the history of our little town. And we won the All Ontario, and, it was a big deal for a small town. And the entire team, to celebrate, they all bought leather coats, team coats. And I couldn't afford a leather coat. My parents couldn't afford to buy it. And, I had businesses when I was a kid. I collected beer bottles for 5 cents, 10 cents, and the value of 10 cents, it meant something to me. So, on the day-to-day basis, I didn't have new clothes. Couldn't afford those. I didn't have a lot of clothes. And, I didn't have, anything outside the basic necessities of food, or even our house, the wind blew through it. It was a 120-year-old farmhouse. We heated it with wood because we couldn't afford heating oil. And, so the value of hard work, I mean, we literally made wood on the weekends, in the snow, and, we grew everything that we ate. So, I did peas and raspberries and strawberries every day, after I, scraped the pigs with my mom. So like those things in hindsight were exceptional. They are why I'm where I am. And when I say first world farm poverty, I mean, I've seen poverty all around the world, and, our poverty was nothing like that. We had love, and we had, enough to eat. We didn't starve. And, we grew up in there was no war. So, from a global poverty standpoint, I had so much. But at the time, when you're a little kid, you just look at what everybody else has around you, and you just feel like I have nothing. Mm-hmm. And more importantly, when my mother was rolling pennies to pay the, mortgage when the bank was, coming close to foreclosure. And I didn't realize it at the time. It was one of my favorite things to do was, every like couple of months, my mom would get out the penny jar and we would roll pennies. And I didn't know at that time that she was rolling pennies so she could, pay the mortgage, or, go to the grocery store and get us to something to eat. So they kept us insulated from it. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that, it was such a blessing for me to have instilled at a very young age a fear of poverty and a desire to succeed. And, that's been a blessing and a curse in many ways throughout my life.
How old were you when you decided that you had enough and you had to do something about your situation where you could take ownership of your own life and how to grow out of that poverty?
Yeah. I mean, I always studied really hard in school, and I kind of knew that it was an expectation that, I would go to university, and, that would be, a way out of poverty for me. I think when I was 16 in my draft year at hockey, I realized that there were only 2 reasons I wasn't going to make the NHL. The first one was size, and the second one was a complete lack of talent. And so when that little dream of, striking it rich in the NHL, at that point, so I was in maybe grade 9 or so. At that point, I'm like, okay, I'm on a path. I'm going to go to university. I'm going to study business. I'm going to get a job on Bay Street. I'm going to figure out how money is made. So, it was kind of like grade 8, grade 9. I'm like, okay, I'm going to dial this up, and that's the path. And that's, I followed that path, and, throughout multiple business degrees and, down to Bay Street or whatever, I was lucky and able to get, breaks and jobs, and, it was a combination of right place, right time, and hard work.
How do you went about paying for university? How did you actually finance yourself? That's
so
not easy to do.
yeah. In Ontario, we were blessed. I mean, it's not easy. But we were blessed to some degree. We had the, as my friends called it, the OSAP program, was the Ontario Stereo Assistance Program for many. They would buy a stereo with their OSAP money. For me, about a third of what I needed came from OSAP. Otherwise, I never would have been able to do it. And I worked 3 jobs. So, I was, thank God for tips as a waiter. I finished school in 4.5 years, so I could work for a half year and collect lots of tips to, and I saved, from the different businesses that I did in high school. I always worked from the age of like 8. I was the guy that did hay for all the local neighbors and worked on the dairy farm. And I just always put, 50% of everything I always made always went into a savings account. That was my university fund. I still, I barely scraped through. I did manage to graduate with a chunk of student debt, but I made it through. And that's one of the beautiful things about, Canada and Ontario. And I look at student debt in the US and other parts of the world, and we're by no means perfect, and there's forgiveness of student loans, but I do think, I have 2 kids going through university right now. I do think that it's it's one of the things that we have to do a better job at, whether it's apprenticeship or it's college or it's whatever it is, at helping our people in poverty have a path out of poverty.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know if you noticed, but things seems to be getting worse, right? Like I moved to Canada in 1991. We barely saw homeless people back then. Now you drive through the city and you have these little city tents, like 50 to 100 tents in an empty lot. And it breaks my heart because we're supposed to be living in one of the richest countries in the world. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, this didn't happen before, and now it's happening. And what happened with welfare and with government money education to get retraining done, and what happened with psychiatry assistance and all that. Like, you're right, like we have to pick up the pace here because I see the way we're getting deteriorated.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And we're not going to solve poverty, homelessness. A lot of that is tied to mental health and a lot of these things in 20 minutes. We talk about it a lot. But one thing that I do know is that immigration and people coming from poverty-stricken areas globally has always been the driver of entrepreneurship throughout Canadian history. And if you look at so many of the manufacturing companies in Kitchener-Waterloo, our backyard, a lot of those guys were founded by, I think about Klaus Werner, who founded ATS, Frank Stronach, Magna. And, those guys came over after the Second World War with, 2 cents in their pockets. And George Pillar, it was a good friend of mine, Pillar's Meats and Sausage and Rosse and many other businesses. And so I always think about that because when I think about our immigration policy going forward, that is where, I love my kids to death, but they didn't have that. I will do anything to, help me and my family and my kids and the next generation. And, if I can't get work as a doctor because they don't recognize that I was a doctor in my other country or an engineer or whatever, then I have to start my own company. And at the end of the day, entrepreneurship, if you look at our tax system, entrepreneurs and people that had a vision to start a company, they're the ones that fund everything in our society today. And if we want to have, for example, a living wage so that nobody is in poverty here in Canada, then we need more entrepreneurs and we need more people driving a tax base and paying, a fair share of taxes so that we can have more of a European social safety network for people. So that's like it all, for me, it always comes back down to, celebrating our entrepreneurs, which is something that in the US, for example, entrepreneurs are held up on a pedestal and, they're seen as, icons of society and incredible. I mean, the ones that aren't crazy, but they're seen as these legendary, folks, and they're looked up to. And in Canada and many other places of the world, they're seen as these, fat cat successful people, so there isn't really, an appreciation for the kernel, the nugget, the work that, everybody that has founded a business. And success rates are, as they're awful, right? People that took risk, worked hard, and became successful, to me, we don't do enough to celebrate and recognize, that these are the only people that are wealth creators in our society, them and all the people that they employ and all the mortgages that they pay and all the people that go to work for them. But at the end of the day, without the entrepreneurs, without that inspiration, without that first kernel, I mean, people think about like IBM or General Electric or Microsoft, but they forget the guys that had that first, idea, and to celebrate and recognize that.
Yeah, and to your point, Canada lives through small and medium-sized businesses. You look at the big corporations, the big multinationals, yeah, they add a lot of jobs into the market, but if you really see who's getting the jobs, who's offering the jobs, is small and medium-sized businesses, which is the majority of the economy in Canada, at least. I think it's the same for the USA, right?
That's why I love your podcast, because at the end of the day, this is just one more vehicle that recognizes how important it is for us to mentor, foster, help, have, regulatory and, other regimes, and to celebrate them, just to have a culture of celebration of the small and medium-sized, people that, risk everything and work hard and end up generating the wealth.
Beautiful. What was your first professional job after university?
I started at Boston Consulting Group, which is a global management consulting group like Monitor or McKinsey. That was my first job. I failed miserably. I was there for 3 to 4 months. It was an amazing thing to graduate, high enough and top of the class, and have these companies recruiting me. So I picked the one that paid the most. I had an offer from an investment bank, which I should have taken in hindsight, but instead these guys paid, a little bit more. So I went there, and I failed miserably from a culture standpoint. I'd never been off the farm. I'd never been on an airplane. I'd never met the kinds of people or worn suits, to the office. And it was a complete culture mismatch. I just didn't fit. I was overwhelmed. I never lived, in the city, as I was saying. And so, I just crashed and burned. Thankfully, one of my classmates had heard that, I didn't make it where I was, reached out to me and said, hey, I work at Air Miles and they just really love smart people. And I get 2,000 Air Miles if I refer anyone who gets hired.
Nice.
And so again, fortunate turn of events, somebody helped me, somebody reached out. And from there, Air Miles was awesome, great training ground. Canadian Tire Finance for 5 years. We took Canadian Tire Money Electronic, turned Canadian Tire into a Schedule II bank. I was a entrepreneur within Canadian Tire, so I was responsible for creating new businesses and new product lines for Canadian Tire. And I just fell into it, and it was my niche. I've been a startup guy and a scaling guy and an entrepreneur ever since. And it was in a corporate environment, so they had really good structure about it, that a lot of entrepreneurs don't have that. So I was blessed with that. Then I ran an incubator for 8 years. We invested in 140 small and medium-sized businesses, and we had training courses and helped them if they needed help understanding how to do cash flow, how to do marketing, how to do, web, how to do this, how to do that. And that was it was such a blessing. It just made me feel fantastic. And after 8 years of that, I felt like I was on the wrong side of the desk, and I was too much the banker with the MBA, and I was just itching to start something. I was involved in helping the McGuinty government with the creation of the Green Energy Act. I saw the price on solar was insane. I actually was going to start a biogas company. The pricing was too low. When I saw the price on solar, I hosted a town hall meeting, and I invited every electrician, every combine tractor salesperson, and every construction person, because it was jobs creating. We're going to create the Green Energy Act. I put them all in a room, and I said to them, you guys should all, like, economy's slow, everything's going green. You guys should all start solar companies. You should start selling solar to farmers. This is crazy. Farmers like my parents can make money from this. And you can build this stuff and employ people and blah, blah, blah. And nobody did it. and I was so frustrated. I remember I came home to my wife and I'm like, I don't understand. These guys all own companies. Why are they not hungry? They're starving in barn construction. Why aren't they jumping on it? And then a guy walks into my office. This is a shout out to Jeff Curran. He said, my Nortel pension isn't doing so well. And I was at the back of the room the other night and I'm looking for something to do. I'm an industrial electrician. And he said, I will start a solar company. I have one condition. I said, what's your condition? My job is to help consult people. I was so happy one person in that room actually listened to me. And he said, my condition is that you're my business partner.
Wow.
And so I stared at the, stable job. My wife was at home at that time with 2 kids. So, my income was our income. And I looked at that, I'm going to leave my comfortable, stable with benefits paying job, and I'm going to go back and become an entrepreneur again. And it was the hardest, most gut-wrenching, difficult thing that I had to do. And so many others that, I had consulted for 8 years. I'd helped 140 people become entrepreneurs. And now here I was, and, really understanding what that, jump off the cliff leap of faith was. It was the best thing I ever did. We incorporated, sold $50 million worth of $100,000 solar systems to 500 farmers in 6 months. It was in Canada, in the US now, as they're deregulating cannabis, right? It was like the same thing. It was like the industry did not exist. So it was a level playing field. Anybody could get into it, right? You needed, there was nobody with background. There was no experience. There was no solar like what we were talking about. And the 20-year fixed price contracts from a government at, a significant margin. It was a perfect storm, right place, right time. And without Jeff coming into my office, I never would have taken the leap. So, and I never looked back. I retired for the first time a couple of years later. It was beautiful.
Now, for the audience, what you're saying sounds like a dream come true and like a miracle, but I know there is hardships inside that story. So what do you have to overcome? Number one, how do you convince your wife that you're going to leave a high-paying job and she's staying at home with 2 kids, and now you have no income? That's number one. Number two, how do you manage to sell $50 million worth of solar panels to 500 farms in 6 months? That's insane.
So again, my wife is a whole nother podcast and she can give you her version, but we had been for 10 or 15 years up to that point, packing away like 30-40% of our salaries. And she had been corporate and was thinking about going back to school. The kids were, getting to school age or back to work. So, it was still hard. We still had to, get a line of credit on the house for, inventory or whatever. So, at the end of the day, the reason I love my wife, and I love her for many reasons, but she just looked at me and she said, this is the right thing for you to do at this time. Like, she saw that I'd been 8 years. Now, even with her blessing, I went to my board, who I reported to, board of entrepreneurs. And I said, I'm going to go part-time. I still didn't believe, that I could do this. I wanted to fall back, I can come back, if it doesn't work or whatever. So what I did is, and I've told so many people this before, you don't lead with product, you don't lead with, finance, you always lead with sales.
Yeah.
So what I did was I said, okay, I need to test and prove this theory. I didn't do market research. I used to do hundreds of thousands of dollars of, would you buy this at this price, from Canadian Tire Research. I'm like, no. I'm going to focus on selling to farmers. It's a market that I know, that Jeff knows. We know lots of them, been working with them for years, helping them start new companies. I'm going to go find some farmers who think green, and I'm going to say to them, look, here's what I see in terms of numbers and profitability. And if you buy this type of a system, this is the 20-year contract you're going to get. I'm just going to go, I'm going to talk to them at their kitchen table. And that's what we did. So I went part-time at work. I drove over to the first farmer's house. He had 4 farms. You were allowed to do 1 solar system per farm. And 3 hours later, he said, I'll do it, signed a piece of paper, and bought 4 systems from us. I'm like, well, that's fun. I said to Jeff after. Jeff was like, yeah, this is real. We just got $400,000 worth of sales on the first morning. I said, great. I said, there's a farmer on the way home. Let's stop in and see him too. And so by the end of the first day, we had $700,000 or $800,000 worth of sales. And
Wow.
then I said, okay, let's automate this. Let's get out to, because it literally was a race. I'm like, there was 300 companies selling solar 12 months after we started, right? There were 0 the day we started, right? Literally.
We're at the top of the wave at the right time, right?
Yeah. So I said, honey, you're not going to see me for a while. This is a race. 2 guys in a van, dropping flyers, meetings in arenas. It was after the corn had come off. It was, October, November. So it was perfect timing. You could get, if you're smart, you could get 30 farmers in a room. You could sell the farmers that own, 10 farms, and you could sell 10 systems at once. And, pretty soon you've got, 100, then 200, then 500, and also make it simple. So we made it really, really simple for the farmers to say yes. We said, look, what you're agreeing to is for us to go and get you the contract and the contract offer. You don't need to give us any money today. We just want to go before this program shuts, which it did the following March because it was overwhelmed with demand. We just want to make sure that you have the potential opportunity to do this if you like. The other thing that we did is we said some farmers have $100,000. They can go to their bank, and we worked with Farm Credit, the bankers, and educated them and the insurance company. So they started referring farmers to us. But some of them could just pick up the phone, call Farm Credit, throw another $100,000 on their quota line or whatever. But what we said to the farmers who said, I'm older, 100,000 is a lot of money, I don't know. What we said to them was, look, we will invest the $100,000 on your farm, and we'll pay you 10% of whatever we get from the government. The government's paying 80.2 cents. You will get 8 cents every time the meter spins. So we ended up selling about 25 million. Of that was where farmers paid us 100,000 because we told them all, why would you let us make the money on your farm? You should buy it. But for a lot of the farmers, so another 25 million, which we didn't have a dime of. So we then had 25 million that we had to go and raise in order to build the other 250 systems on the farmers that said, sure, I'll sign up for your free money and just put it out behind the barn because my wife doesn't want to have to look at it out the front window.
Wow. Now, I run a business. I run multiple businesses. The engine that drives the business is sales and marketing, what you just did. But there is another thing that you have to do in order to stay in business, and that's delivery. So one thing is to sell, promise, and make a sale, and then you have to make sure the client is happy, and whatever you said you were going to do, you're actually delivering on that promise. How do you fulfill so many solar panels in such a short period of time? Like, did you have manufacturers in Canada already building solar panels?
No, there literally was nothing. So in fact, that's why we stopped selling, because I was like, I don't know how we're going to do 100. How are we going to do 500? So the whole time we were out there in the van selling, I was making calls, and I was making calls to the European companies that had seen that Ontario had created this solar market, but didn't know how to get into it. So I was looking for a company that had installed hundreds of systems or thousands of systems like this in Europe that wanted to do a joint venture. I figured I'll go get these $50 million and I will joint venture because I don't have the time to build that out. And the Europeans were really, and I needed the 25 million. So I either needed, I was hoping I would find them both in the same place. But the Europeans, they were all interested, but they're all nervous because throughout the world, they have these wind and solar subsidies that come and go, right? And Europeans, they need to get to know, it was slow. So I said, what I need is an aggressive American with more money than brains that, it actually has built out solar. And that led me to Elon Musk. So I literally cold called Solar City. It was run at the time by Lyndon and Pete Rive, who grew up with Elon. They're his cousins in South Africa. And I called them. And they said, how soon can you get on a plane? And they were headed towards an IPO. And the number one detractor to their IPO price was lack of geographic diversity. They had 99% of all their solar systems installed in California. They had paid tens of millions of dollars to lobbyists and regulators, and this guy's job was to launch in 5 new markets. He just launched in New Jersey and Texas. State by state, they were launching. Well, like everybody, they never thought of Canada. Canada is like a rounding error, right? I used to pick up licenses to products because people are like, Canada, we don't even know where that is. We don't sell anything to them. Sure, you can have the rights to my product. I used to tell people to do that. So I just did the reverse. We called them. We spent an intense 5 days of negotiating with them, signed, well, we had letters of intent signed. We're on a plane, we're high-fiving, here we go. They're like, how many trucks do you want? You guys just keep selling. We'll send a COO up. We'll send guys to train crews, hire crews, whatever you want. We're launching Solar City, Canada. You guys are the co-CEOs. We'll throw in a Tesla. Away you go, right?
Wow.
and that was beautiful. And then this is a story entrepreneurs know so well. We land in Toronto, and my inbox was jammed, not by farmers, but with people from the Ontario Sustainable Energy Association that I had sat on to help write this act. Do you see what Dalton McGuinty just did? They froze the contracts while we were in the air. So I then had $50 million worth of sales, and they said they pushed through 10 million of them. For the other 40, they said was, there's been such overwhelming demand. We never set a cap on the program. We're freezing your contracts. Well, freezing the contracts meant the Europeans in Solar City, they disappeared because they were paying me for the ability to build out this 50 million and go sell another 500 million.
Right.
It was such a blessing. Rather than being a slave to Elon and his team, which I would have been, I would have done very well. But Jeff and I, what we did was we were able to build out those 10 million. So the first 100 systems. And Jeff is incredible. He, hired, he ramped up, he dug in, electrical crews, trades crews, build crews, crane, start to finish. And so, is one of those where, if those contracts hadn't have been frozen, which at the time I thought I was bankrupt.
Right. Of course.
When I got that phone
it
call,
was the end, right? You had everything aligned, and all of a sudden
I'm
the
done.
government pulls the chair from under your seat,
I'd quit my job, I'd mortgage my house, I had solar panels and stuff. I didn't know how they worked. Jeff just told me, buy this one like this from this guy like that. I just started buying them up, putting deposits down. So we ended up building them all out ourselves. Today, Jeff services 700 units through solar farm to little units to whatever. So it's, 10, 15 years later, our farmers are happy. They get paid every 6 months. I cut them a check for land rent. It's 10 times per acre, the going land rent for somebody to grow corn as it is to grow solar. Everybody's happy. And the price of solar is now about 20% of what it was then. So now solar actually is the cheapest form of new installed production. And so we're actually in the process of selling a whole new wave of solar. It doesn't require any subsidy anymore.
That's beautiful. So you actually kept the company, you figured it out yourself. And thanks to that, now you have a multi-million-dollar business that still runs.
You know what? Right place, right time. A lot of luck.
But a lot of hard work. Isn't it true that the obstacle is the way? And when you think you want to get your way in a certain way, and you're stubborn and you try, and all what's happening is that you're meant to just to pivot and get it the right way, but you don't know what that way is, and you are actually facing bankruptcy. You are facing calamity.
It's 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration, and I don't know which is harder. That inspiration, like the entrepreneurs that are creative problem solvers, right? That when they need to pivot, when they're staring at bankruptcy, when a partnership goes bad or joint venture, like when the chips are down, when it looks like you should pack up and fold your tent. That's when you really, really need to be part of other entrepreneurs groups or folks like yourself, David, to really have a a network of people that you can say, hey, look, here's my problem. Here's why I can't sleep at night. Here's what I'm trying to figure out. Because, there's so many parallel ways that other people have solved a similar problem. And, I used to say, solitude is the death of the entrepreneur. Because what happens when you get into crisis mode, if you don't have that network, you just get inside your own head and you just spiral down and down and down. And you just your creative problem solving ability. And that's why I was blessed to have a business partner. And that's why I was blessed to have other entrepreneurs that I had helped finance that I could then call them and say, you know how I helped you when you were in trouble? How do I figure this out? I have no idea.
It's beautiful, yeah, and it takes the network for sure, and also when you are at the top in your business, it gets very lonely. Your employees don't understand you, your partners don't understand you. You need that network. Since I started joining business networks, I've actually started growing exponentially. Another thing that is fascinating to me that I want the listeners to know, I'm a computer scientist, so I see patterns. And, I have over 100 episodes in this podcast. I have been blessed with so many people that want to be in the podcast. And the common denominator is that before a breakthrough, there is always a huge hardship. Like there is a huge obstacle that you need to figure out how to cross. And it feels that you're going to die trying to cross that obstacle. But if you manage to create enough momentum and surround yourself with the right people, you cross that bridge, brother, and there is nothing but abundance and blessings in the other end, isn't it?
100%. You're absolutely right.
I was talking with somebody yesterday, and he actually had a chain of beauty salons, and it was going great. And then one of his best employees took all the clients, and he opened his own salon, and he got him bankrupt. And so that what he told me is, it was crazy. I never opened a new business again because I was so traumatized. So he became a professional in another field. And he says, now I get a paycheck every week. And it's such a blessing to have that consistency. But then he said, if I would have had a network of people, if I would have belonged to a business network, I would have kept going, right? And my life would have been different. And it's okay. I love my life now. And he's past 70 years old and he's still working and he's a happy individual. But it's so important that you have to pick up the pace. You have to raise from the dead, if you will, when those things happen so that you can, persevere and achieve success, right?
Yeah, and that's a really interesting comment you make about your friend, because I used to count as a success if people came into my office and they said, I want to buy this company, or I want to start this company, I want to leave my well-paying gig and do this. And just educating them on what it's actually going to be like and what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur. And then that individual says to me, Jaret, that was really helpful. I've decided not to buy that company, or I've decided I'm going to stay where I am and, collect my paycheck and, re-engage in my profession. And to me, that was as great a success, helping somebody go into entrepreneurship with eyes wide open. Now, the flip side of that is oftentimes I talk to entrepreneurs and they said, if I had any idea what it was actually going to be like, I never would have did it. So there's kind of this happy balance, but you don't want people to, go into something with their eyes closed and, failure, almost guaranteed because they're just not prepared or don't have support networks or don't have knowledge. So, I always consider it a win if I'm helping somebody get into entrepreneurship with their eyes wide open and mentoring. And I also consider it a win if I help people figure out, hey, you know what, this isn't for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's both okay. At the end of the day, we're going to die and we're going to leave everything behind, isn't it? So it's about
100%.
What makes you happy? Like I keep telling people, oh, I want to reach $100 million in sales. That's my better future, because I'm always looking at a better future. But I'm not going to wait until I get there to be happy. I'm already happy.
Yeah.
There is, I read a book by my mentor, Dan Sullivan. He's my business mentor, and he wrote a book called The Gap and the Gain. Because we entrepreneurs, we're always looking at the future, and we forget to look back and see how much we've done.
Mhm.
And that creates suffering, isn't it? So, and
Very
listen,
much. Yeah. A lot of us have what's called imposter syndrome. And when I first heard that and somebody described it, I'm like, yeah, I get it. I I couldn't believe that, I graduated from the business program. I couldn't believe that I owned a house. And I certainly couldn't believe that I was a successful entrepreneur, yet society was telling me that. One of the one of the lucky things for me is I live in the community where I built all these solar systems. And so I actually drive different ways to work each time, or to the office, or to meetings. I always actually drive around so I can actually look at them. And I'm like, oh yeah, I did that. Like, you can see, touch, and feel it, right? Which is, so much better than the software engineer or somebody that can't see it. And so, yeah, I mean, you're 100% right. We forget to look at and celebrate our past successes. And, it's kind of a curse of the human mind. We get success, we want more. We get 10 million in sales, we want 100 million. The other interesting piece of it is I'm a shareholder with a good friend of mine, majority shareholder he is. And, we had a business, and, my brain was just, I'm going to help him scale the business, right? And I was doing strategy and finance for the company and just helping him figure out his path to growth and mentorship. And so Peter went on this, rapid expansion. And like so many other entrepreneurs, you got a happy little company at, say, $5 million in sales, and you're driven to make it $50 million in sales. You get to $50 million in sales and you're really unhappy. You have 5 times as many headaches. You've got 5 times as many HR problems. You've got, when an audit hits, or a new tax, or a change in the market, or you get stuck with inventory because you didn't hedge and exchange rates goes down, all of a sudden you've got like multi-million-dollar swings. And your culture changes. You're not like, 5, 10 employees taking on the world and everybody knows everybody and Christmas parties. Now you're, 50, 100 people, and you don't even know some of the people that, work for you. And, so I oftentimes, and usually at 50 million, oftentimes you're not making any more money than you were at, 5 million, where you're priced properly. And, so I'm like, no, sometimes you just gotta, fire the 70% PETA pain in the arse customers, or just give everybody a price increase, or give them a price increase if you're not willing to fire them directly. And if they take it, now they're, worth the pain. It's the pain price, the pain margin, separate price. So, growth at all costs. There's a litany of companies that have grown and grown, but then not been more profitable, and also not been as satisfying to the founder or the owner.
So, it's so true. It's what you're saying is so true. Growth has to have a purpose, not just for growth, right? It's funny because I always keep telling people I'm still in business because I have one of the best CEOs in the market, as CFOs in the market. My CFO is incredible. He predicts and predicts and predicts, and he always tells me, David, I'd rather have, like you said, a $5-10 million company with 20% EBITDA than having a $100 million company with minus 5% EBITDA. And that happens all the time, to your point.
Yeah, you need you've got exactly what you need, which is you need somebody who's passionate about finance, and you need somebody who's passionate about sales, and you need somebody who's passionate about building and installing and servicing your product and designing the next product. And those people often forget, they call it the 3 legs of the stool, the trilogy. I use the Ciroli methodology. And it's like, no one individual is passionate about all 3. They may be capable at 2 of the 3, right? But there's usually a blind spot. And so from my perspective, that's one of the things that we did for every entrepreneur, is got them to self-analyze and say, what are you most passionate about? Because you should do that. And you should understand, but you should find somebody just as passionate, whether they're a shareholder or they're a hired CFO. You need somebody just as passionate about the CFO. in solar, I mean, like, I didn't know what a solar panel looked like. I was selling them, right? My business partner, he's like, I don't want anything to do with pricing or margin. I don't understand finance or accounting or, reserves for bad parts or any of that. So your trilogy in terms of what you need passion for, because it's got to be fun too. And the last thing I wanted to say, David, because I know I'm always yammering on and running out of time. So after retiring, I came back because people in my entrepreneurs organization and YPO kept coming to me and saying, how did you do this transaction? When do I exit? How do I exit? How do I get ready to exit, even if it's in 5 years? And so the last, sort of 5-10 years, I've been doing a lot of helping people after helping them scale. Now I'm helping them start to think about, what does that exit look like? And for so many entrepreneurs, they become so tied up into their identity is the same identity as, I'm the founder of X company. It's on the license plate, and it's, it takes over their family life even, in many cases. And the idea that their baby is going to be handed off to somebody else. And, at the end of the day, as passionate as we are about starting our company or other companies, as passionate as we are about that, that's not life, right? And every company in the history of the planet that's more than 50 years old has either gone bankrupt, slowly just closed up shop, or they've sold it and somebody else has scaled it and grown it going forward. So that's really where I'm spending a lot of my time now, is just helping people. And, running an exit transaction, we do end to end. There's lots of people that can do valuation models. There's people that can negotiate. There's lots of lawyers. There's people that can do research, find buyers, create selling docs. But the thing that actually is most rewarding for me, and why I sub all those other things out, having done them all myself, the piece that's really interesting for me is, how do you fulfill and help the psychology of the entrepreneur who is at the stage where it's the right time. It's the right time to hand the keys over to the next generation or a different owner, or even, to keep the company, but move on and be chairman and hire a CEO and actually give that CEO full, not be micromanaging them. Right. So I think that in itself is, again, a whole nother podcast, and it's enjoyable for me to help people figure that transition out.
Hey, Jaret, brother, like, you're always welcome to come back. I know we have to schedule another one. You have so much wisdom to give. You started your life training people to become entrepreneurs, and now you're helping people exit. What a beautiful life. Thank you for the value you're adding to this world. I really, really, really appreciate it.
David, it's always a pleasure. I look forward to many more.
People like to contact you, find you, so that you can help them exit. Where can they find you online?
I'm Jaret, Jaret, at penguinpower.ca.
Jaret at penguinpower.ca. Wonderful, brother. Thank you for being in the show. I'll see you shortly, and have a blessed rest of the week.
Wonderful. Take care, David.
That's all for today's episode of the Break Free Podcast. Head on over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Starting your own business can be tough, but it doesn't have to be. Visit davidmansilla.com to pick up a copy of the #1 international best-selling book, Breaking Out of Corporate Jail. Expand what you consider to be possible and reach your full potential. And join us on the next episode.